Okay, I think we can start.
Yep.
So recently I learned some very interesting stuff, and I would like to share what I figured out with the team. So today we are going to talk about business architecture. It will be like a lightning talk with a high-level overview and introduction. As first point, we will be talking about business drivers, goals, and objectives. And first, let's discuss why we need to understand and document business architecture. First, why we need to understand business goals and drivers. First, we are living in the time when it's not always enough to be just a software vendor. It's always better to be a business partner, and where you can really help business to make more money and reach their goals. We should always, as a company, we should always understand why we do it, why we do our product, and to understand it, we to understand why business need it. And also, we need to understand how make our clients happy. And like a first first point, how we can make them happy. We can let them reach their goals via our products or our software or via our partnership. And to do it, it's obviously that we need to understand how business works, how business makes money, and what the benefit for them will be to have a partnership with us. Also, we can, as a technical partner, we can always propose and recommend to them a better solution from our point of view, because customers are sometimes they are far from IT business, and it's much better for us and much easier for us to give them very useful advices and help them to reach their goals. For whom it's useful to understand driving goals and business in general. I think it's quite important to understand these points for almost every team member, because the first question we should always ask ourselves is why we do it. Not just do a list of tasks that are assigned to us, but clearly understand why we do it. Because, as I mentioned, maybe we can find a better way to do it. Maybe we don't need to do this like task at all. And yeah. First thing is business drivers. What is business drivers? Business driver is internal or external change or impact, which indicates a reaction from the business. So it's something that requires reaction from the business. Some examples of business drivers. For example, business always want to increase revenue, and we need, so this is like driver. This is driver for business. So they need to do something to increase revenue. So it requires reaction. Next example is prices of products, services sold. So, for example, they would like to decrease price of product to be more competitive on the market. Again, this is a challenge, and business should react somehow on this challenge. Business should do something. A few more examples of business drivers is increase effectiveness of salespeople, increase tax in the company. So this is example of external change. Let's imagine one day the tax in the company has grown, and business also have to react something to it. We can't, for example, just increase the price of product because we won't be competitive. And the business should think how they can deal with it. And another example is rent and office space. For example, business wanted to decrease an amount of money they pay for office space. So probably they would need to decrease an amount of employees, and to do it, they also need to do any actions. For example, create any software that will require a reduced amount of employees or something like that. Next point is goals. Goals is a general statement of what we want to achieve. This is intent, direction, or desired end of and state for an organization and its stakeholders. Goals is the results of the drivers. So, for example, we have a driver, and goal is, as a result, this is something measurable. This is like kind of step, what or intention, what should we do, which goals should be defined to reach, to react to these drivers. There are some rules how to write goals. It calls SMART. In general, these rules can be applicable for any goals we set. It's quite useful rules. So even for our currently we set goals in our sprints. So we can also use these rules, and we can use these rules to validate if we defined goal correct or not. So the first rule is goals should be specific. It should provide a clear description of what needs to be achieved. Also, it should be measurable. It should include a metric, a target that indicates success. It should be achievable. We can't just set unachievable goals from our mind. So we should clearly understand that this goal is achievable. Relevant. This goal should be consistent with high-level goals with our drivers. So, and it should be time-bound. We should set a date when these goals needs to be achieved. A few goals example: increase the number of products sold by 15% this year. For example, we have this business driver to increase the revenue, and as a goal relevant to this business driver will be to increase a number of products sold by 15% this year. If you try to validate this this goal, this is quite specific. We need what should be achieved. This is measurable. We have this 15% achievable. We know that this amount is quite realistic. Also, it's relevant because it becomes as a result of a business driver, and it's time bound. We have a time when it should be achieved and when we should check and define to we achieved this goal or not. A few more examples of goals is increase profit by 1 million this year, increase market share by 10% over the next 3 years, lower operation cost by 15% over the next 2 years. Let's move to the objectives. And objectives are actionable items needed to achieve business goals. So we have drivers, we have goals that we define as a reaction to this driver, and we have objectives. An objective is something actionable. This describes how we can achieve these goals. And for example, if we took our previous example with business driver, our business driver was company wants to increase the revenue, and goal was to increase a number of products sold by 15% this year. Objective will be to create an online shop. This is particular action. What should we do to achieve our goals? One more example of objectives is make 20 additional cold calls per week. For example, we have a goal to make sales more effectiveness, and to achieve it as an objective, as a concrete task, we can ask our managers to make 20 more additional cold calls per week. And this is example. This is very generic example with some theoretical company. This is the way how this business architecture can be documented. There are 3 sections: drivers, goals, and objectives. And let's review some points. So first, driver, company wants to increase the revenue. As a goal we define to react to this driver is to increase a number of products sold by 15% this year. And particular actions, objectives, what we need to do to achieve this goal is to create an online shop and open shop in Paris. And in general, this create an online shop, this is something that we can do as a technology company. And looking at this scheme, we can clearly understand why business needed to do it and which goals they are going to achieve, and which drivers was a purpose to achieve, to define these goals. Next driver is to increase tax in the country. This is an example of this external driver, and which goals should be defined to react to this driver. We can decrease product cost by 5% and decrease sales cost by 10%. And as actionable points to achieve these goals, in first case, it will be upgrade the machine tool for product production. It's not related to IT, and decrease sales cost by 10%. It can be an integration with CRM. And this part also can be related. In objectives, we don't define particular what we are going to do. We just define it on a high level, what actions should be done. Having this business architecture documented, it helps us to understand why we do our product, and helps us to understand how to keep stakeholders and business satisfied, because we know that they will be satisfied when they achieve their goals. And also it will help us to understand and recommend them for technology they can use for it, because we clearly understand why and what was the reason why we need to do an integration with CRM, for example, or why we need to create this online shop. This is it in general. It was a really high-level overview. Do you have any questions?
Not really a question, more like a statement. This is something I guess we need to start a conversation we need to start a conversation with every new client, talking about these things first. Like, what would you like to achieve? Not in terms of goals, probably. No. Yeah, I'm just talking and thinking at the same time. We can't start the conversation with the goals of a particular client, of a new client, but then we would like to figure out what are the drivers behind these goals, and then we help to define the objectives, right? So we're not talking about the drivers originally. We're not talking. We're not asking the client what drives you to these.
It's what's referred to elsewhere as 5 whys. So often shops like ours, someone comes to an agency and says, we want an e-commerce site. So you say, why? And they say, because we want to sell things online. And then you say, why again? And they say, because we want to increase the number of products sold. And you ask, why again? And they say, because we want more revenue. And what you have to do is you have to deconstruct why people might come to you and then try and get further up the chain. It also helps you get further up the chain of stakeholders, because the closer you get to the C-suite, the better. And those are the people either deciding or reacting to drivers. And then they are also the ultimate decision makers as to how they will set goals. And then other stakeholders will handle tactical objectives and meeting those. So this is really good. It also plays into a couple of things that we're looking at the moment. One is UX. So Ali's working on UX. She is never given an objective, or if she is, like, she just says, well, that's not my job. That's what the team is going to do when we have talked about why. And you talk about the goals and you say, okay, how do we get people to buy more products? And that is a step before what is implemented and what is built. Someone else we're talking to at the moment is a machine learning expert, and UX and machine learning, or UX and data and analytics. Let's not call it machine learning for a moment, but data engineering play very well into that same conversation that starts at the beginning of a project or a contract. And so having those wrapped together drives us towards this business direction before any technical implementation or tasks to do with building are even discussed.
Yeah, when people ask me about like how System Z is different from other companies, I think what I'm trying to explain them, and thanks Sergey for defining this in a better words, I'm trying to understand them that when people come to us with objectives, when clients come to us with objectives, we try to understand actually more about their business and what drives these objectives. But thanks to Sergey's, I guess, presentation, we should split like drivers and goals. Sometimes I called it drivers, sometimes I called it goals, but it's actually a different thing, drivers and goals. And that's what we are aiming to understand first before we start with any implementation of any of the objectives. And that what makes us like different, and that what makes us genuine technology partners, that we understand their business first and understand their drivers and goals before we do the objectives.
Yeah, also quite important point that I think we also always think about business, about their goals and drivers, but I think it's important to have it documented, because we know it, but sometimes we might not understand, we might not see like the full picture. For example, we didn't talk to like right stakeholders, so different stakeholders has different opinions. And when we have this documented, we can review it once again from the high level perspective. Also, we can confirm and discuss it. Maybe they have another vision. So it's always better to have it like documented.
Yeah, and another point is obviously we've got a fair share of staff in the company that are focused on development. And this is really good stuff for everyone to understand and bear in mind, but you won't all be expected to make this happen. So there's other people in the company whose job it is, like Elise, like me, like Ev, to ask the whys all the time. And there's others to, the core of a lot of the businesses in our deliverables. And people who are focused on building and engineering and QA and all these other things, they should understand all of this, and they should be able to poke holes in it if the UX and management of clients and the business model behind the scenes doesn't look good. But obviously, no one's expecting everyone in the company to become a manager, a business-driven consultant. So this is the role typically that you would find in a consultancy would be a business analyst. And so there's people who are deliveries principals that are in charge of the output, more like project management. There are people who are technical in the team or design. And then there are people who are focused on the business analyst. The business analyst role would typically, as I say, overlap with data and UX and design, as well as technology. So it touches on a lot of different things, but not everyone in all of those different roles is expected to be a business analyst overnight.
Yeah, but I think it's still like not super important, but good for everyone to understand how it works and why we do our job.
For sure, yeah.
I think it also scales down to specific tasks or epics. Obviously, in case of epic, you will not have like business driver, but you will be able to build better acceptance criteria and better technical concepts if you understand more about the expected outcome of that task.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes like we are working on CRM now, and sometimes we face interesting issues when we understand that actually you don't need to overcomplicate some things because it's an edge case. It's almost one-off task, and in other cases we understand that we need it to be more flexible because we expect this certain part to be scaled, plugged to another website and something like that, and we are able to do our job better because we understand the whole scope of CRM project. And what I miss in this presentation is how we introduce feedback loops, because I believe that this kind of structure isn't static. There are many different assumptions that make business analysts or anyone, and they trial them and they fail and they introduce new objectives and so on. So it's more like dynamic, and we as technical partners should be part of this like feedback, iterative process of feedback, what worked and what didn't work.
Yep. So this example is more generic, and when we are talking about any more internet technology specific stuff, these objectives there, as Kate mentioned, they should be like real features, so real epics that should be implemented to achieve goals and react to drivers. Also, as far as I know about this feedback, this documentation it's updated like for a certain period of time, but it's definitely dynamic. It can be like really static. Great. Any other questions?
I have a question. Imagine situations that developer take a task, a story with some requirements, and he don't understand the driver and goal, how he can get more information about the goal of the story and drivers, how we can solve it.
I might play Captain Obvious role, but ask for this information. I mean, like you got a story, and as a developer, you have two options. One option is like, I know like technically how to get it done, and you just jump straight into the development and start doing something. Then here's the output, and you can get done exactly what you've been asked to do. But the truth is, you don't know if what you has done makes any gives any value to the client. I know examples when clients came to us with a very specific technical requirements. When we started asking lots of why questions, turned out that the project is absolutely not about these technical things that they were asked us to do, because the client, that particular client, didn't know exactly how to build a project, and they thought that if they will update a few things here and there, then they will get a better website. But as soon as we started asking lots of questions about the project, the stakeholders, the drivers behind the goals, turns out that that client didn't know the exact goals, and it took a few weeks over the course of that conversation to figure out the project shape, and it turned out that it needs to be like literally a new project, totally different from what it is currently there, because the project was done following the client's requirements. The client thought, let's do this, boom, here, let's do like that, boom, it's there. And developers probably did a great job, but there's no value at all in the work they've done.
So asking is always a good idea. Asking team members.
Yeah, and also probably very good idea that Sergey said that have documentation about it, and probably we need when we create a new story, we need to think about something like documentation where new people who can join the team can read about drivers, goals, and so on, and after that he can pick the stories.
That's a very good point, and this is something that I recently put on my own to-do list as a technical lead of the company, that we need more structure around the projects we do. Like, we have quite a good dev process, but I mean more, not specifically technical structure, but like the drivers, focused on understanding of a project objectives and goals and drivers. Now I'm going to use the right terminology. Thank you so much, Sergey. That's what we should be doing, I think, in a more structured way. And then as soon as somebody joins the project, here's like 1, 2, 3 pager explaining what the project is about, what the client is doing, and what we need to achieve. Something like that. I mean, I haven't shaped exactly how that will look like, but that's the point.
I'm just going to jump in again. So I'm going to reiterate what I said before, which is it's great for everyone to understand all of this. It isn't everyone's responsibility to dive into managing it. And if everyone in the company was expected to be a business analyst, they would get a lot less done in other areas of their job and their responsibilities. So what we're doing to combat that is, it's great to see Sergey taking the initiative and going for it. Ev obviously has to understand it when we talk to people for the first couple of meetings and to judge how things are going. The other point is Elise and Alejandro being able to work on UX, and someone being data-driven and analytics-driven. Now, in the company to date, we've had a lot of generalists, and people who can dive into analytics and sort of set it up and sort of understand it. And the work being done there is good, but they're not from, you know, I don't think we have any data scientists with a master's degree or PhD who's got 10 years working in data. So, you know, we're looking at that at the moment. And that combination of data and analytics with UX is very, very powerful, because that is someone saying, again, 5 whys. Why are we doing this? 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 And why are we doing this? I think that's the 5th one. And then you start to simultaneously talk about UX or CX and data at the same time. And eventually you get into this very tight agile loop where you are testing a hypothesis, it's live, and it's got data to go with it immediately. And if you're not reviewing that data, it's worthless. And you shouldn't even pretend you're doing agile with hypothesis-driven design. So that UX and data is very tightly linked. And you know, as I say, it's good for everyone in the company to understand it. Not everyone has to become a data analyst or a business analyst.
Great. Any other questions?
One of the things we've done in a lot of these talks is decide if there are outcomes and next steps or anything to do. I would like to see the whole company come together and base system seed around this model, so that we can all understand it and we all get to the bottom of what's going on. And yeah, we try and put it in action for ourselves before trying to serve other people with that same model.
Great.
We'll try and make some time for that before the end of the year.
Great, guys. If you have any other questions, if you have nothing more to discuss about this topic, I think we can leave it here.
Thanks, Sergey.